Today, I'd like to talk a little bit more about not doing. I'm drawn to talk more about not doing because it's such a fascinatingly difficult thing to talk about within the context of the particular society, civilization that we live in. It's one of those things, it's probably the thing that makes the least sense out of all the things you could possibly talk about. Not doing makes the least sense. And so I hope to go into why it is so very, very hard for us to understand. And also, I hope to go into why it is very helpful for us to understand it, even if it doesn't sound in the least bit helpful to our purposeful, goal-orientated minds. Because obviously, if I have a purposeful, goal-orientated mind, not doing is not really going to be a topic of any great interest to me, really, except in a very trivial sense, which could be the sense in which I take a break and go on holiday or just spend the day in bed, in which case what we're talking about is recovery time. And the recovery time is there to facilitate our working, so we can't work all the time. So we can do whatever it is we do, go on holiday, engage in leisure time activities, stay in bed, whatever it is, in order to better facilitate our purposeful doing. And that way of looking at things, it's obvious that the purposeful doing is the thing. That's the important thing. Everything else is there to help with the purposeful doing. And if it doesn't help with the purposeful doing, then there's no point to it at all. Even though when we think about it, if we were to think about it, to be preoccupied with the doing the whole time is frankly bizarre, and that should draw our attention to how unbalanced we've become. Because when we do continuously be engaged in doing, that's clearly a form of insanity. Right? What are we trying to do and why? What is the fruit of all our doing? And is that what life is all about? Just constant doing until you die, do until you die. And according to our way of looking at things, it pretty much is. Purposeful activity is what passes for life. And we can say that there's two sorts of purposeful activity, the type that's successful and the type that's unsuccessful, like winning and losing. And obviously we all want to be engaged in the type of purposeful action that is successful. And when we can do that, that's brilliant. We've got it made. That's what everyone wants. That's what we all want. That's what society advertises as being the ultimate state of being. Continually doing things and continually being successful at it and continually obtaining our goals, which is frankly bizarre, absurd, as I was saying. It's kind of like what they say about living in order to work versus working in order to live, which is very much a Western thing. When we do stop working, we don't know what to do apart from engage in leisure activity or play. And it's not real play, it's kind of just like Western recreation type play. It's not play as in real playful play, because we stop being playful when we become adults, because we become very serious machines. serious machines can't play. That's what makes them serious machines. And the whole thing about society is it wants to turn us into serious machines. Why does it want to do that? Because society is a machine. It's a serious machine. It can only recognize and acknowledge other machines. It wants us to be machines, not intentionally as a result of some kind of considered thought process, because that's all it ever can do. And it assumes that everything is a machine. So it's all implicit. The logic is implicit, not explicit. So talking about not doing, and particularly focusing on therapy, how that's helpful in therapy. So a good example of this that we could give, which is something we'll be able to relate to, is meditation. So meditation has a place in mental health service provision, what we do as mental health service providers. And it has a place if we're suffering from some kind of mental health condition or trauma or anything at all really that's upsetting us. Meditation becomes a thing that we can do. And the key thing that I want to talk about here is that the fact that we imagine that meditation is a tool. And the thing about this is that shows that we don't understand meditation, because meditation is a not doing. And if meditation is a not doing, how can it be a tool? Or how can there be someone who does it? If it was a doing, then there could be someone who does it. If it's a not doing, it doesn't make any sense. Let's say there's a person who's doing the not doing. That just becomes meaningless. As it is meaningless to say that not doing is a tool. Because if we say that it's a tool, it's got to be a tool for someone. So who's it a tool for? If there's no one there not doing, if there's no one there doing the not doing, really no one there at all, because it's a not doing and no one needs to do it. How is that not doing a tool? So this nicely highlights our rather cramped way of looking at things and understanding things, which has always got this the doer and the doing dichotomy. Now we can say that meditation is a not doing, but even saying that doesn't make any sense, because when we learn meditation, we're given instructions, so that implies it's a doing. If I'm given instructions, it must be a doing. But that's not really meditation. That's just it is a kind of a necessary fiction that meditation is a doing and that we have to do it. So somehow we have to be brought into it by using this fiction that meditation is a doing and that we have to do it. So that's fair enough. We're told all these things, we're given tips, we're told to bring our attention to, say, the breath, and to very gently come back to the breath every time we get distracted, and keep on doing that, and that's meditation. And maybe if we get really good at it, we won't be getting distracted so much. We'll just stay present with the breathing, and that should be good. But staying present with the breathing isn't a doing, because if I try to be present, I become absent. So that's what happens when we apply the logic of the everyday world to something where it doesn't belong. The logic of the everyday world, everyday life, doesn't belong everywhere. It only applies in certain places. It applies to everyday life. I make a cup of tea, I do that on purpose. That's everyday living. Meditation isn't like making a cup of tea, which is fair enough. Why would it be? Even though you can meditate while you're making a cup of tea, it's still not a goal-orientated action. So this is what happens when we try to apply everyday logic to meditation. We discover that it backfires, it rebounds, it explodes in our faces, and that's okay. It's good to discover that. That's what it's all about, discovering how our normal things, routines, don't work. So I try to stay present, and as a result of trying to stay present, which is aggression, I'm trying to make something happen which isn't happening, I become absent. In other words, I become removed from the actual situation. I just get removed. I've gone somewhere else. I'm in my head, or however you'd like to put it. So straight away, this is exactly the same as being spontaneous or being yourself. If you try to be yourself, you become artificial. You become something that isn't yourself, a kind of act which doesn't have anything to do with being yourself. It's just kind of you make yourself all awkward and funny and then not yourself at all. So that's another thing. But sticking with the being present, which is what we want, which is the thing, is to be present rather than absent. The big spanner in the works is that this is not a matter of intention or will. So what can I do? How do I get around this? At first sight, it seems to be an insurmountable barrier, but we learn that the negative way is what works, not the positive way. The positive way is doing, getting stuff to happen that isn't happening, or getting things to be a way that they aren't. That is what purposeful behavior, or the rational purposeful mind, is all about. It's about that and nothing else. It's all in that, all in that one sentence. Making things be what they aren't, or making things do what they're not doing, or making things happen that aren't happening. That is what it all comes down to. It's very simple, really. Tediously simple. So here we have another thing. And the other thing, the negative path, means being aware of ourselves, trying to be present, and being aware of the effect that this has, making us absent instead. So really, it's taking an interest in what is going on all by itself, because I didn't write the rule books. I didn't make things happen this way. I didn't make myself not intentionally be absent when I want to be present. That's just the way things work. That's the way the world works. So here I'm not trying to make the world work in any other different way than it does work, which would be a real headache. I'm noticing how the world works. I'm not trying to make it work another way. So that's the difference between the negative and the positive. In the positive, I'm always trying to make things be the way that I want them to be. In other words, I'm projecting my assumptions about life, about reality. And that's what we do all the time. We project our assumptions. It's a religion for us. That's why we're so crazy about goals. A goal's an assumption. It's an assumption that if I do this, then that's great. I never examine it too closely to find out that maybe it isn't great, or maybe it doesn't make any difference at all, because if I did that, that would take the wind out of my sails. So the purposeful life is the unreflective life. It's the busy life. And it's also the life that goes on and on and on, just doing the same thing over and over and over again, basically. it's a tedious life. The purpose of a life is immensely tedious. When I say the purpose of a life, I mean the purpose of a life where all our purposes or all our purposeful actions are all linked up together. So as soon as I stop doing one, I get things to be the way I want them to be if I can. I start doing that all over again, and I do that again, and I do it again, over again. With no discontinuities, no breaks, because it's in the breaks and the discontinuities that we are present, not in the doing, because we can't do presence. So I'm going round in circles here a little bit, but just to come back to this key point, that what helps us to be present is not doing, and we can't do not doing, and there's no one there to do it. As a result of watching myself in my everyday positive actions or purposeful actions, and particularly with regard to meditation, if I'm doing a meditation practice, in this I'm not changing the way that I am, but I'm taking an interest in the way that I am, as if the way that I am is worthy of interest, as if it is sufficient just to be able to see how the way that I am without changing it, as if that is what my job is, so to speak. Even though it's not a doing type job, I'm not trying to get an outcome at the end of it. So if I stick with the negative path, which basically comes to being present with my own absence, because my own absence is what I've got. When I say my own absence, I could equally well say my own goal-orientated way of life, because that's all absence. It has to be absence, because the implication is that if I'm successful in obtaining my goals, then somehow that's a good thing. Now, the only good thing ever is, or could be, is being present. What is the sense of a good thing if that isn't involved? Because if I'm not present, how could it be good or bad? It's nothing. So the only good thing really is being actually present. And yet that's the one thing that goals can't do, and there's no such thing as a goal of being present. It works backwards, as I keep on saying. So the goal-orientated life is a life of absence. And I can't make a goal of not being absent, and I can't make a goal of having no goals. But what I can do is be present with my absence. And that's not a doing. As soon as I notice that I'm absent, there's a bit of presence there, because there's no noticing without presence. If I'm not present, I can't notice anything. And if I can notice, then there is presence there noticing it. And there is always the capacity to notice and the capacity to be present. And it involves this aspect of our nature where we are genuinely interested in how things are. Not because we want to learn something that will help us manipulate how things are, or not because we want knowledge that will be translated into the ability to create a technology or the ability to control. Much, much simpler than that. Just interested in the way things are, because that's the way they actually are, and that's way more interesting than any fantasies I could have about how I'd like them to be. It's more interesting for the simple reason that all my fantasies about how I'd like things to be, or I think things ought to be, are infinitely dull. Infinitely dull. They're all the same thing. There's just this wallpaper I just keep putting up, which is my assumptions that I've never examined. So it's not even anything to do with me, how I want, or to do with my nature as I really am, how I want things to be, or my goals. That doesn't come out of our, whatever you call it, our true nature, it comes out of our assumptions that we make and don't examine. So our true nature is nothing to do with this business of making assumptions and not examining them. As I said earlier, our true nature is about being interested in what's actually out there, never mind just projecting on top of it straight away, so we never actually get to notice that. So it is our true nature to take an interest. And when we do take an interest and we do notice what's happening, then we become present. Not because we wanted to. Actually, however, our agenda was never to be present. We might imagine that it is. We might imagine that's what we do want. But it isn't. If we ever did start to be present, we'd realize that it is not me who is being present. It's not my ego construct that is becoming present or becoming more real or something like that. Actually, being present means the perception that the ego construct is totally unreal and is in fact the very thing which was preventing us from being present. So by being present, we lose the doer. We lose the one who is to succeed. We lose the one who is the winner, the one who is successfully engaging or otherwise unsuccessfully engaging in purposeful activity. We lose that. So when we say not doing isn't a tool, that's not nice to hear, because I want it to be a tool, because I want to be affirmed and validated as the tool user. So if you turn around and tell me it's not a tool and no one does not doing, that's done me out of a job. I don't want to hear that. I don't like it. It's not what I wanted. I want to make everything my tool. I want to exploit everything, because that is the way that I maintain the apparent solidity and reality of this idea of who I think I am. Being has nothing to do with that, even though being present is the only thing that will help us when it comes to our ongoing neurotic conflict and suffering. We still don't want it, though. We don't want that solution. Not that it is a solution, because that's not quite the right word to use, but we don't want it anyway. At the end of the day, what we want is to carry on as we are, doing the stuff that we do, perceiving ourselves in the concrete, narrow way that we do, as the self-construct or self-identity, and not have the pain that comes from that. And that's why I would say that in the West, we're not really interested in meditation, because we don't really want to go down that road. Okay, thanks for watching.